We want you to choose the ones that pique your curiosity the most. Simply comment with the numbers of the stories that you find most intriguing. Once we've gathered your feedback, we'll create a detailed video about the story that receives the most votes. Your input will help us make content that you'll love. Some of the most over-the-top horrendous genuine wrongdoing stories come from sequential hoodlums, executioners, attackers, fire-playing criminals. Yet, there are a few wrongdoings with conduct so peculiar, so disrupting, that they could keep you from resting at any point in the future. While large numbers of these unbelievable stories get eclipsed by additional notorious cases, these 11 awful obvious wrongdoing instances of years past will advise you that repulsiveness comes in various, horrible shapes and sizes. 1. The Kid in the Case. In February 1957, an understudy coincidentally found the remaining parts of a little fellow in the forest of Philadelphia, and detailed his grisly revelation to the police. The kid was seen as gravely beaten and let go inside an old bassinet box. His character was obscure. A few group offered data connecting with the case, however the police couldn't confirm anybody's declaration. One lady, Martha, asserted that her harmful mother purchased the kid. Under their rooftop, he was exposed to physical and sexual maltreatment. What compelled the police check out Martha's story was her insight into subtleties that had not been delivered to general society. She guaranteed that not long from now, before the kid was pounded into the ground, he ate prepared beans, which substantiated the post-mortem examination. She additionally asserted that he was washed before his demise, which matched the coroner's finding of water-pruned fingers. However, Martha's declaration appeared to match the proof. Her significant history of psychological instability made her an untrustworthy observer. One more lead came from a portrayed and encouraged home close to Mystic where the kid had been found, while never having seen it. Remington Bristow, a representative at the inspector's office, followed the Mystic's bearings to the Encourage house. Inside, he found a bassinet matching the depiction of the bassinet in close the kid was found. He additionally found covers like the one that was folded over the kid's body. Since there was no genuinely implicating proof against the temporary parents, Bristow's discoveries were excused too. After 62 years, the instance of the kid in the case has gone cold. Facial recreation innovation has given mock pictures of what the kid could have resembled alive, yet nobody has at any point approached to guarantee him. DNA and dental testing have likewise been endeavored, with no achievement hitherto. The character of the kid in the container stays obscure right up till now. 2. The Icebox Murders. In 1965, Fred and Edwina Rogers were living in Houston alongside their developed child, Charles. The family generally minded their own business in their peaceful area, particularly given Charles' hermetic and withdrawn conduct. As a matter of fact, many neighbors were not even mindful that Charles inhabited home with his folks, since he went out every prior day first light and didn't return until well after dusk. At the point when a relative hadn't heard from the Rogers in a few days, he called the Houston police for a government assistance mind his old auntie and uncle. The patrolman couldn't find Fred and Edwina, however they saw food sitting on the lounge area table. They opened the refrigerator and saw various bundles of meat, flawlessly stacked on each other. Then, at that point, they saw two human heads in the vegetable receptacle. Extra officials showed up on the stomach-turning scene and gradually eliminated the bundles loaded with eviscerated body parts from the cooler. The remaining parts were that of Fred and Edwina Rogers. The police derived that Edwina had been mercilessly beaten and shot, while Fred experienced intense injury to the head. His eyes had been gouged out and his genitalia eliminated. The couple's innards had been washed away for good. Charles was mysteriously absent. Normally, Charles was the superb suspect in this shocking wrongdoing. Notwithstanding, he appeared to have disappeared off the substance of the earth. However, the police had the option to gather conditional bits of proof against him, Charles Rogers was rarely found. 3. Dorothy Jane Scott. Ahead of schedule in 1980, Dorothy Jane Scott started getting compromising calls at work. She was the single parent of a baby, who didn't respect the calls from the get-go, until one night when the evil voice via telephone advised her to look outside. A solitary dead rose was lying on the windshield of her vehicle. The stalker who had gotten tightly to her number would sway between pronouncing his affection for herself and compromising in essence hurt. Dorothy referenced to a few relatives and companions that the voice via telephone sounded natural, yet she couldn't exactly put what his identity was. She never had an opportunity to find out. One evening, at a workforce gathering, Dorothy saw one of her colleagues looked sick. She and another partner drove the man to a close-by medical clinic. The specialists said he had a terrible insect chomp and required a solution. While the two collaborators were trusting that the remedy will be filled, Dorothy went out to the parking garage to get her vehicle. It was the last time she was seen alive. Her colleagues affirmed that after she didn't return, they went out to meet her in the parking area. At that point, they saw her vehicle hurrying endlessly, so they expected there was a crisis with her child. Dorothy never got back to her child, nor did anybody hear from her once more. After 4 years, her scorched bones were found at a building site. Adding one more layer of secret to the case is the way that a bunch of canine bones was seen as right close to her remaining parts. However, individuals on the web are as yet examining the case today. Nobody was at any point sentenced or held in doubt, and the puzzling guest was rarely found. 4. The Chicago Tylenol Murders. In September of 1982, a 12-year-old young lady in Chicago died soon after ingesting an additional strength Tylenol. That very day, a man passed on in an emergency clinic in the wake of taking a similar pill. 2 of his relatives followed. Throughout the following couple of weeks, all the more apparently solid individuals in Chicago fell down and died, and the main thing they shared, practically speaking, was taking additional strength Tylenol right away before their less than ideal demise. As jugs were reviewed by Johnson & Johnson, it was found that a considerable lot of the additional strength Tylenol pills had been bound with potassium cyanide. Whenever this was disclosed, Johnson & Johnson gave various advertisements and admonitions to clients to keep away from the item. The organization started working intensely on a triple fixed bundle that would forestall altering. James William Lewis of New York City reached Johnson & Johnson guaranteeing that he was answerable for altering the jugs and filling the containers with cyanide. He requested $1 million in return for him to stop. He was captured for the wrongdoing, and despite the fact that he wasn't seen as liable, he was as yet detained for coercion. Indeed, even after Johnson & Johnson sustained their Tylenol bottles against altering, the far-reaching insight about what had occurred in Chicago provoked violations of a comparable sort all over the country. A few additional individuals kicked the bucket from cyanide poison found in other non-prescription medicine. The Chicago Tylenol murders is one of a handful of the genuine wrongdoing stories to ignite genuine change in the country. The quality control of drugs expanded 10 times, as did the security of their bundling. Albeit the FBI needed more proof to convict anybody of the wrongdoing, it is generally accepted that James William Lewis and his significant other were for sure dependable. 5. The Girl Scout Murders. In the late spring of 1977, 3 little kid scouts remaining at an Oklahoma camping area were assaulted and killed. The young ladies, Lori, Michelle, and Doris, were between the ages of 8 and 10. Around 2 months before the homicides, a camp guide tracked down an upsetting note in her effects. The offender vowed to kill 3 youngsters at the camp. Realizing that youthful campers appreciate recounting terrifying stories around the open-air fire, the camp guide excused the compromising note as just a trick, a choice she would come to lament. Promptly in the first part of the day of June 13th, the young ladies' bodies were found in their hiking beds out on the path, prompting the camp showers. The main proof that their executioner left behind was a red spotlight and a horrendous impression. The excellent suspect in the Oklahoma young lady scout murders was Quality Leroy Hart, a got away from convict. Hart had been raised about a mile from Camp Scott, and at the hour of the killings he was on the loose subsequent to getting away from jail, where he possessed been serving energy for thievery, capturing, and assault. A nearby jury cleared Hart of the wrongdoing, referring to an absence of proof. Be that as it may, Oklahoma police consider the case addressed. Right up till now, nobody knows whether Quality Leroy Hart pulled off murder, or on the other hand, in the event that the genuine executioner was another person totally. One way or another, the young lady's executioner never saw equity. 6. The Unicorn Killer. As a young adult, Ira Einhorn provided himself with the epithet of the Unicorn, the English interpretation of his German last name. The executioner was a natural dissident and part of the counter-conflict development when he killed his ex, Holly Maddox. Maddox vanished toward the beginning of September 1977 in the wake of coming by Einhorn's Philadelphia loft to gather her things following their separation. Half a month after Maddox's passing, police interrogated her ex regarding her whereabouts, to which he expressed she had vanished en route to the local center. After 18 months, after neighbors started detailing a rank smell, police found Maddox's body stuffed in a trunk in Einhorn's storeroom. A few days before Einhorn should stand preliminary, he escaped to Europe. As Einhorn had previously been summoned, the court had the option to attempt, convict, and sentence him in absentia. In spite of this reality, Einhorn figured out how to stay in France for quite a long time, in any event, getting hitched while cunningly sidestepping removal. The US government was at long last ready to take him back to the States and once again convict him in 2002. Einhorn is presently carrying out a day-to-day existence punishment without the chance of parole. 7. Issei Sagawa. This barbarian turned into a neighborhood superstar in the wake of marking himself out of a Japanese mental foundation in 1986. Issei Sagawa came from a rich family, and had shown primitive desires since the beginning, in any event, participating in savagery. At 23, he tried to eat human tissue, breaking into a lady's home to remove a portion of her tissue. He was gotten and accused of endeavored assault. Afterward, he would move to France to procure his PhD in writing. It would be then, at 32 years old, that Sagawa would kill and eat his cohort Renée Hartevelt. He conceded to tricking the 25-year-old Dutch lady to his loft, all the while intending to mislead and misdirect. He said he picked her for her magnificence and well-being, two things he accepted he needed. Subsequent to shooting her in the neck, he ate different pieces of her body throughout 2 days. He then, at that point, endeavored to dump her body, counting 2 bags of her eviscerated body parts, into a lake in the Bois de Boulogne, however was trapped in the demonstration. In the wake of being held for a considerable length of time in police guardianship, Sagawa was considered lawfully crazy in French court and was requested to be held endlessly in an emotional well-being organization. In the wake of being ousted to Japan, he was announced normal by Japanese analysts as had the option to sign himself out of care. 8. The Granny Killer. An English-conceived Australian chronic executioner, John Wayne Glover was known for asking on old ladies, including the widow of craftsman Will Ashton. Over the range of 14 months, somewhere in the range of 1989 and 1990, Glover killed 6 older ladies after fiercely going after them. On occasion, he utilized essentially his clenched hands to go after his casualties. With others, he utilized objects like mallets, his casualties' pantyhose, and different instruments. Large numbers of his casualties were essentially ladies he saw strolling past him in the city with whom he started up easygoing discussion. As well as going after and killing those 6 ladies, Glover was additionally blamed for attacking and physically attacking a few other older ladies. At his preliminary, a therapist noticed that while Glover was normal, he had an extreme behavioral condition, which could possibly have been associated with his tempestuous associations with his endlessly mother by marriage. In the wake of being viewed as blameworthy and condemned to jail, Glover committed suicide in 2005. Days before he passed on, he gave his last guest an image he had drawn highlighting 2 trees and the number 9. As far as anyone knows, 9 is the genuine number of murders Glover was answerable for, not only the 6 for which he was sentenced. 9. New Orleans Axeman. This American chronic executioner was dynamic in the more noteworthy New Orleans region somewhere in the range of 1918 and 1919. Most of the killer's casualties were from the Italian foreigner local area, and were killed with a hatchet that had a place with them. The executioner would get to his casualties' homes by eliminating a board on their secondary passage, then enter and kill them with either a straight razor or a hatchet. The fierce chronic executioner went after no less than 12 individuals absolute, the greater part of whom were ladies. Related, the Axeman of New Orleans murders. In Walk 1919, the unidentified executioner sent a disturbed letter from damnation, where he portrayed himself as undetectable, even as the ether that encompasses your earth. I'm not a person, yet a soul and a devil from the most blazing damnation. In the letter, the Axeman expressed the date and season of his next arranged murder and recommended that the best way to stop him was to play jazz music. Accordingly, the whole city filled its structures and roads with the music's sound that evening, and nobody was killed. The hatchet killer would strike 3 additional times before his action at last stopped. Today, the tale of the Axeman has been repopularized thanks to a comparative person in American shocking tale, Coven. 10. The Girl in the Box. 20-year-old Colleen Stan was en route to a companion's birthday in Northern California when her prospective detainer Cameron prostitute, and his better half Janice got the drifter. Stan would spend a large part of the following 7 years caught in a case that let in no light, sound or outside air, persuaded by the whores that a strange and perilous association would kill her and her family in the event that she didn't consent. Under an understanding among Janice and Cameron, and ultimately, through an effectively marked agreement with Stan, the young lady was to be a sex slave for Cameron, however no entrance at first happened. At the point when Stan was let out of her case, where she spent as long as 23 hours every day, eating cold food scraps and utilizing a chamber pot, she was tormented and assaulted utilizing different items. Quite a while into imprisonment, an indoctrinated Stan was permitted to visit her family once and even found a new line of work. Be that as it may, when Cameron said he believed that Stan should be his subsequent spouse, the whole alarming circumstance went to pieces. Stan in the long run got on a transport and escaped to her family, while Janice handed her better half over, getting resistance for her full collaboration. 11. The Eyeball Killer. This Texas killer and analyzed maniac killed somewhere around 1 lady, with 2 additional thought murders to his name. Embraced from a shelter, Charles Albright was really focused on by his exceptionally defensive new parents. His mom was a teacher and sped up his realizing up to this point that he entered school in his youngsters. Notwithstanding being so splendid, he was likewise known for participating in criminal way of behaving, captured first for exasperated attack at 13 years old. His dangerous roots, in any case, lied in a youth interest. After Albright got a shotgun early on, he utilized it to kill little creatures. He would then stuff them with the assistance of his mom, assuaging his advantage in taxidermy. Subsequent to neglecting to finish pre-drug preparing at both North Texas College and Arkansas State Educators School, he would be shipped off prison for robbery, attack, and in the end the homicide of a sex specialist, despite the fact that police associated him with no less than 3 additional slayings. His casualties' bodies were left almost or totally bare out on a city road. They had been shot in the head, and their eyes had been eliminated with careful-like accuracy.